better scientific understanding of the processes.
It is said that severe space storms could cost anywhere from $1 trillion to $2 trillion during the first year, but that, let's say, the state of Hawaii, it could be like $1 billion a week. Is that true?
Yes, we're talking big sums of money as far as impacts on the economy itself. I mean, if you're shutting down a third of the nation, the nation as a whole produces $13 trillion a year in economic activity. Very little of that economic activity would be able to be carried out without reliable electric power in those same areas. So the cost can be quite large. Even more troubling is the social or human costs that we potentially are talking about. You know, the potential for millions and millions of fatalities. I mean, within a matter of just a few days, you would have chronic shortages of potable water, foods, medicines. And unlike what we've experienced in hurricanes, we're talking about a footprint of these disturbances that could be quite large. You know, when we talk about responding to hurricanes, again, we see most of the major damage occur within just a few counties of landfall. And you're able to provide aid from surrounding, less affected neighboring areas. In the case of a blackout that extends from New York, New England, Washington, D.C., on through Chicago and beyond, how do you get aid from surrounding and less affected areas across those vast distances? There's lots of problems with how to respond effectively to an event that is so very large in its physical scale. In the case of reconstructing the power grid for the Hurricane Katrina, they pulled power crews all the way from Minnesota down to Louisiana to aid in reconstruction of just the power grid infrastructure. They pulled National Guard troops from many states. In the case of Hurricane Andrew, when that went across one county in Florida, Homestead County, and wiped out that county in Florida, they had to pull National Guard from Alabama, Georgia, and other southeastern states to assist in that recovery. And the availability of critical equipment like transformers was limited for a year afterwards, just in response to the requirements to help rebuild that one county alone. Now, when we're talking about something that could engulf a third to a half of the continental U.S., these are scenarios that have never been called upon before. We don't have any planning for how to deal with that.
That's amazing. It's shocking,
in addition, remember, these are going to be planetary events as well. So you could have the same thing unfolding in Western Europe, Japan, China, and other developed regions of the world. There could be, issues of geopolitical stability and tensions brought on.
But aren't some countries already ready for this? I hear that there are some countries that are receptive and open to getting prepared quickly that don't have the same complexity of grid that we have in terms of infrastructure. Is that true?
I don't know of any large complex power grids that have done anything yet. One could argue that this sort of disaster will be perhaps unlike other natural disasters, where it will affect most heavily the most developed societies of the world and least developed societies of the world.
So, do other countries have the same type of grid setup that we do, though?
Very similar, yes. Western Europe has a large interconnected continental grid, much like the U.S. grid. China is actually expected to surpass the U.S. perhaps within the next half decade or less in size of their grid. So they're developing technologies that, in some respects, make them even more vulnerable than the U.S.
Is it just a question of getting something to protect the transformers, or is it more involved?
In the case of the geomagnetic storms and the low-frequency transient from EMP, it is about protecting the transformers and blocking these harmful currents from entering the transformers. We think, I've actually invented devices to do this. I've installed them, tested them on large high voltage transformers, and we think this is something that could be applied in a broad enough scale to largely eliminate or nearly eliminate this sort of vulnerability.
Is it called a hay-a-day or something, or a care-a-day device, or what do they call that?
The device that we would attempt to install on the power grid would be neutral blocking devices or neutral current blocking devices. The large storm scenarios that we're worried about is a Carrington event. This was the name of a very large storm that occurred in 1859 and was named after one of the first scientists to ever see a large solar flare from the surface of the sun and the resulting impact of a geomagnetic storm here at Earth.
So you're preparing for that level of event. You're preparing to protect the transformers.
That's what we think is necessary, yes. It doesn't help to protect for smaller levels of events and not be prepared for this one. We don't want the devices to only work for smaller storms and fail to work properly for the big storms, because it's the big storms that could end the functioning of the power grid as we know it.
What is it when people talk about modernizing the grid? What are they talking about? What do they mean? Let's modernize the grid. What does that mean?
A lot of the recent discussion that has occurred within the, especially the new administration, is this idea of smart grid. And it's putting more smart sensors, smart electronics, communication between the power company and the end user of electricity to try and control the amount of power that's being used on the power grid and more efficiently use that power in the power grid. In addition, there's also been quite a bit of push in the direction of, on the power grid, trying to use green or renewable energy supplies and develop those for the nation. One such example is increased wind energy generation. And if you look at wind energy across the U.S., it has the capacity to replace 20 to 50% of other means of generating electricity. And if you're using that to, say, replace or reduce the use of coal generation, then that arguably